first panel session of the two-day Generative AI conference. Welcome. Thanks very much for choosing this panel section. I know that other choices were available, but you should completely rest assured you've made the right choice because this panel will be diving into the use cases of generative AI in media and in marketing. Just to introduce myself first, I'm Stuart Bowden. I'm the Chief Strategy and Product Officer at Wavemaker. We're a technology and media planning company, and we look after clients from L'Oreal to Netflix, to TikTok, and to Paramount. And so we do quite a lot of work in the entertainment and media space, as well as obviously being a marketing business ourselves. I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by a truly excellent set of panelists who I'll be introducing you to in a moment. And together, over the next 50 minutes or so, we'll be looking into the subject of emerging use cases across the media and marketing landscape, some of the drivers behind them, some of the barriers that people are going to need to overcome. But just to briefly set the scene, so Nigel, on one of his slides earlier on, I think showed a timeline that stretched back 54 years to the earliest dawns of generative AI technology. But for many of us and for most of the use cases that we're going to talk about from a media marketing point of view, that history stretches back exactly 47 weeks to the kind of public launch of GPT 3.5. But the media and the marketing industry were very quickly into the potential automation, the potential creativity, and inspiration and production capability use cases inside generative AI. And for those of you who follow Air Street Capital, who are a kind of very interesting VC analytics business, every year they publish a state of AI. It's in its sixth year now, and they make a prediction about the kind of 10 changes that they will see landing in the real world in the next 12 months. 4 of those changes are straight from the media and marketing world. They're predicting the first Hollywood blockbuster that will have all of its visual effects automatically generated by Gen AI. They're predicting a Billboard 100 hit generatively produced. They're predicting a major international lawsuit for misinformation from a media company relating to the 2024 presidential election. So lots of use cases coming up in the immediate time frame, which I think is what makes it such a kind of interesting area for us. So let me quickly introduce the panel, and we can get the discussion underway. Immediately to my left, we have Michael Bhaskar, publisher and author. His first book, Human Frontiers, explored why big ideas sometimes stall and how they get unstalled and move forward. But most recently, he's co-authored a book with Mustafa Suleyman, who you will recognize as one of the co-founders of DeepMind, called The Coming Wave, really looking at some of the bigger picture issues and challenges we're all going to face over the next few years. Next to Michael, we have Dr. Alex Connock, one of the most respected and certainly one of the busiest and most active academics in the fields of AI and media, a senior fellow here at Oxford at Saïd Business School and Exeter Business School, somehow fits in carrying the same role at National Film and Television School. He's also written one of the core texts in this area, media management and AI, which I was lucky enough to study under him at Saïd a few years ago. And finally, on the end, we're joined by Mayze. Di is Global Head of AI and Data at WPP, the world's largest marketing and advertising company. Just over a third of the world's advertising is conceived, created, and distributed by WPP. So Di has a ringside seat on the changes in a $1 trillion business that is very often very first into these areas. So a kind of fantastic panel. Just give them a quicker Saturday morning round of applause. Michael, I'll start with you if that's okay. I know over the next couple of days people will be getting into quite a lot of detail about specific use cases, specific aspects of AI, but I think given that you write a lot about the bigger picture issues, I'd be interested if you could perhaps stop us getting too deep too soon and help us think about the ways that the bigger picture shows up when we think about media and marketing, what kind of big context should we try and have in mind before we get down to specific use cases? Oh, you're going to have to. Hang on. Take the tiny mic.
I can. I'm quite good at shouting loudly, so I'll try not to shout loudly now that this is going on. If I can get it on. Right. Good morning, everybody. Yeah. So I think on that, I've coming to a few conferences recently, started to notice that the hype cycle, as it inevitably does, is starting to turn. And people are already starting to sort of say, oh, well, actually, maybe this is all just a load of froth. All these crazy valuations, that's a bit ridiculous. The actual sort of number of use cases, surprisingly limited. Organizations struggling to actually integrate this into the workflow. All of the IP questions. It's all sort of starting to kind of perhaps turn on the other side to where it was earlier this year. But I do think it's worth stepping back, and especially when we're talking about media, because I think that does enable us to see a bit more clearly what's happening here and some of the potential. So, you're talking about the media industries, you're talking about language, images, stories, information. And I think that the first most important thing to say are, these are really not trivial things. They're not trivial things for human beings. As a species, we evolved in concert with the ability to use language. The shape of our skulls is different from other primates. We can't chew like them because we evolved jaws that are very different and weak, but they can make sounds that form language. Our basic societies are built around language. Human intelligence is a kind of linguistic construct, a social intelligence. Language is what underpins our culture, our communities, our laws. Language is such an intrinsic thing to everything about humanity and the societies that we live in. And in the space of about, maybe let's say 5 years or so, language has gone from being the pure preserve of humanity to now being something that is as automatable as a production line for cars. And I think if we don't see that as a massive and profound change, hundreds of thousands, millions of years of evolution just short-circuited in the blink of an eye, the very thing that holds our society and our lives and our humanity together suddenly just rendered a completely kind of automated process. We don't think that is a fundamental change, that in the long term is likely to profoundly alter almost everything, then I really think we've missed something. And so, yes, this little hype cycle that goes up and down in 5 or 10 year, iterations, that might be happening. We might be about to have another sort of little mini winter. But certainly for me, the long term is that the ability just to produce an image, to create a story out of thin air, to find information and just repackage it automatically, to use language exactly as a human being would. I think that's potentially the biggest change of our lives. And so, at a conference like this, when we do kind of get into a lot of the problems, some of the opportunities, we get very granular, we get very skeptical, perhaps rightly. It's also worth remembering this. The media industries aren't just a kind of nice industry that, keep us happy and all of this. It's not just a way of kind of monetizing content. It is actually something that is more fundamental. And so, I think that's really worth remembering.
I think it's fascinating that we'll obviously spend some time in a minute talking about whether businesses and enterprises and industry are ready for this rapid evolutionary change. Do you think humans are ready for this rapid kind of evolutionary change? That this is going to be faster than changing the nature of our jaw? Do you think we're psychologically and socially ready for this?
I think maybe psychologically more than socially, because we are very adaptable, and people already are adapting to it. Socially, I don't know. I mean, I think short term it's fine because the use cases are actually still quite specific. I think, it's when the systems that we've got now become more general than they are already, and also more agentive. And once they are, more active agents, I think that's the critical moment. ChatGPT isn't really an agent, doesn't do anything of its own volition. But it's once you match this capacity for language with a kind of goal-oriented agent, then now I don't think society is ready for that at all, nor any industry.
Talking about industry readiness, I mean, advertising industry marketing is often quite a fast follower to new technology, to innovation, to new cultural trends. How well prepared is your business, is WPP, and what things are you seeing starting to come through that really catch your eye, that take your breath away, perhaps, about the changes that are going to come in marketing and media?
So one of the best things about being in this industry is that we've always been quite adaptive. It's the nature of being master at engaging with humanity. You have to understand it, otherwise there is no advertising, there is no marketing, because you're not creating any demand. So we've always been quite open to seeing new technology, and like all overnight successes, we've been on this path since 2012. Starting with good data use. And for me, who loves data slightly more than AI, sorry, I'm loving all these discussions because it brings back the importance of good quality data, unbiased data sets, really good data governance, and then to unleash creativity on top of it. So we started at WPP our data code of conduct training in 2012. 2016 was our first Gen AI campaign. We recreated the works of Rembrandt using generative AI technology, and that wasn't what he would do next, as in a copy. We deconstructed every paint stroke, the way he painted, the colours that he used, and worked with his family. So this has been a long time in the making, but for me this year's been really interesting because obviously ChatGPT, and we talk about that as AI gets a UI. We know OpenAI themselves did not see that explosion, but it being open sourced and having a user interface that was accessible suddenly exploded. And we had to pivot really quickly we built a data and AI community, we've built data and AI literacy programs. Culturally at WPP, we've been arming our people so we bring everybody on the journey. This isn't like digital. When I had my first digital role in 1999, when I had to ask for permission to get an email, and I sat in a department on my own. This is so different from that, and I'm loving that. This is for everybody. And the journey we've gone from a client perspective is, to begin with, all the clients want to know, what the hell is happening? Can you tell us? And we were updating this presentation every day on Google are doing this, Facebook are doing this, Adobe are doing this. This is where you might fit. Let's just get a scene set. And very quickly, with the fast follow, they were like, what does this mean? What are the guardrails? And we work with the legal team all the time, and I thank them. And people are often surprised that I really like our legal team. And for me, they create boundaries with which I can create chaos. And I can do that without killing any brands. And so that's what we did, a fast follow, how to use Gen AI responsibly and creatively. And we were very purposeful in the decisions we've made. So we didn't ban anything at WPP, but we were very clear that certain technology should only be used for no IP, obviously no personal data, nothing to go in the wild, but go and explore. We will make sure we try and create guardrails, and then we open that up to clients. So we created some principles. And then, as you would expect, everyone's going, how are you going to operationalize this? And now we're in the case with a lot of our clients on, what are your use cases? Where's the role of AI in your business? What are your guardrails? Do you want to be a smaller business? Do you want to displace people? I'm not seeing a lot of that, to be honest. I'm not seeing entire roles going. And long may that continue, because I think if we can create a bit more of a balance and take away some of the work that's not very interesting and leave more time for thinking, or maybe not working every weekend and every evening, maybe greedy jobs might deteriorate. So that's where we're at. And then from an internal point of view, we're looking at how we make everybody more productive, how we build AI into our tools and products so that they can be better and faster and do more, and then there'll be a whole business model disruption.
So interesting internal use cases there, and obviously lots of external client industry use cases around generative AI as well. And it's really easy to see what drives a business's interest in those areas. 115,000 people inside WPP, all knowledge workers, being able to make them marginally more productive or marginally, significantly more efficient is a big number. Mm-hmm. What friction is there in the system that kind of stops those use cases coming through? There's clearly a lot of desire, but not necessarily a lot of things live yet. Are there system frictions that people need to be thinking about?
Oh yeah, loads. I mean, we do have an overarching principle of just because you can doesn't mean you should. And anybody who's tried to create any brand assets using generative AI will know actually it's still pretty shite. You've got people with 3 arms, massacre the world's biggest brands. So we have a real responsibility that these companies that have invested millions and millions of dollars in building brand equity, brand trust, that has to be preserved and in a best case enhanced, but worst case preserved. So we do strip it down into what are you putting in? You know, we all know the stories of personal data or bonuses, all of that. So be really conscious of what you're putting in. But the bit that concerns me more is the explainability of the training data set. So we don't think everybody in the world should build their own large language model, but if you're using one and you don't know what's gone in it, that should be a massive, massive red flag for you. And machine learning and explainability aren't natural friends. But the very nature of what is in there, and is it copyrightable? Has it been protected? Are we, and I know my friend on my right will be talking about this, but are we infringing IP copyright laws? If we don't know what's in that training data set, then you cannot necessarily trust what's coming out. And that's the conversation we're having, and just trying to create guardrails.
Yeah, it's interesting that just the gap that still exists between conceiving intellectually of a powerful business use case and then having to hack through people's misunderstandings or misapprehensions and concerns and the kind of business practicalities. And Alex,
your turn for tiny mic.
Oh, thank you. Hello.
I know that you've been talking and writing quite a lot about the Hollywood, the writers' strike and the issues around actors being pressured to give up rights to their own images for them to be AI reproduced. Do you see those kind of frictions slowing down Hollywood's progress towards use of AI, or is it, or is that perhaps not a primary use case when you think about entertainment models and media models?
I just wanted to pick up on Michael's image of the early humans. And if you think about the painting on the wall at Lascaux with the human hand, which was drawn around in 50,000 BC or whatever it was, if that was just done by a machine, it would have no emotional connection to us. If it was just a bunch of dots that somebody spray painted the machine. It's the fact that a human did it. And so I think that what's happening in Hollywood at the moment is that a lot of people are very worried about AI coming in and somehow replicating or replacing creativity. But if you actually talk to people in Hollywood, which I did, it's been a very onerous month there in July, I didn't discover a single studio executive who even thinks about creating content with AI. They're just not interested. HBO, Netflix, BBC have talked to them all. They're just not interested because there's that lack of human connection. So you mentioned in your opening talk that the special effects on a Hollywood movie may be done by AI in a year's time. I think that's credible. But that's very different from a Hollywood movie being made by AI. And there is just nobody in Hollywood who thinks that's a good idea at the moment, who thinks that we could make Succession with an AI or create some brilliant new show. So I think there's been a little bit of a disconnect between what the actors and the writers were worried about and what the studios actually wanted to do. And you see that again with the actors. So the actors are very concerned that because they did a tires commercial in Las Vegas 5 years ago and they signed some release form that bought out all the rights, that Disney are going to wake up next week and buy that image from that tires commercial maker and put it in their next Disney movie. Yeah. And it's a completely ludicrous and farcical concern that is never going to happen. Because if you've ever met a lawyer from Disney, they demand a copyright for every boulder in a cartoon, every asset, every palm tree, every little sound effect. They're never going to put an actor in a movie without a direct sign-off from that actor. So in a way, one of the main things that the actors are on strike about is something that no one wants to do. And not only that, it's also a complete misunderstanding of generative AI, because of course, the thing about synthetic humans is that you don't directly replicate JLo unless you're doing it with JLo, which Dai's agency actually did. What you would actually do instead is you would take 1 million faces and create a new synthetic human. So yes, there might be some theoretical kind of a priori copyright violation of someone's image, but it's going to be incredibly difficult to discern that that's a real actor. And it's going to be even more difficult to legally track that back to some kind of copyright violation. So I think in a way what I would say is, yes, someone can replicate Frank Sinatra singing the song from Frozen and all the rest of it. But I don't see any particular sign that that degree of human connection that really makes a hit or a hit movie is going to come from AI anytime soon. And at the moment, it's just a tool for the implementation of content rather than a generative tool to really create the next succession.
I'd be interested if anyone had a point of view on if we'll see more situations like this where people are unionizing or collectively, preemptively identifying risks in business use cases and trying to slow them down inside kind of organizations, whether we'll get to a more conflicted place.
This is one thing that Dai was saying. He said, Dai is very modest because you guys are from WPP and you've been like 3-4 years ahead on this. Now, I've done a kind of roadshow around UK TV companies and the LA TV companies in the last month or two, and no one is anywhere near as up to speed on LLMs as WPP is. And only now has the BBC just announced an LLM policy, and most people have not even thought of the idea of doing what Sir Nigel just said, which is having your own kind of laptop-based, sort of super compressed but really effective and highly tuned, personalized LLM, which is probably what we all really want. And what I've been saying to companies is you need to get out there and basically create your own LLM, which will then solve the copyright and training data problems that Dai mentioned and give you the ability to play in this space without copyright violation. And I think that's probably where this industry is going to go in the next year. It's kind of customized, laptop-based, super tuned up, very personalized LLMs. Yeah. I don't know what the room thinks, but that's,
But just to sort of, I've still got mine. So my day job is as a book publisher, although I'm sort of moving more into AI, and the response of the book publishing industry to the current wave of generative AI has been utter fear and loathing across the board, and just a total, almost universal desire to shut it down and to stop this happening. The view of book publishers and authors is this is theft of intellectual property. It's a core challenge to your very kind of reason for existing. Whether you're a cover designer, whether you are a senior executive at a publishing house, almost everyone is just universally against it and is already looking at every possible legal recourse to breaking anything to do with AI entering the book publishing world. Which I think is a really stupid and just unlikely to work in the long-term attitude. As a publisher, I make my living out of intellectual property, so of course I have a belief in it and a faith in it. But it's just not going to be credible for intellectual property owners to create a viable model for LLMs. And already, I've sat there with intellectual property agencies, copyright agencies, licensing agencies, and they stand up on a stage like this and say, what needs to happen is we need to create a licensing and monetization model so that intellectual property owners are fairly rewarded. And then, at the drinks afterwards, they're like, yeah, we have absolutely no idea how that would be possible because, when you've got 1 billion, trillion copyrighted works that have been fed in and, the actual monetary value of the LLM is completely speculative and maybe a lot even smaller than some of the owners of those systems would like, there's just no way to kind of cut the cake that finely. There is no way. So it is a bit of a mess, but I think all of those people, we in publishing, need to be a little more proactive. Think, right, how can we actually use these systems? It's not just an attack on the core business model, it's also an opportunity. And I think, somebody said that, Dai, it was you, said that, advertising industry has a sort of track record of riding waves of disruption. I think the media industries do as well. Every single wave of technological disruption going back hundreds of years, they've always survived, they've always changed, evolved, found new ways of working, and ultimately have probably ended up as strong as ever. And that's what I think needs to happen now. And it is a massive challenge. But you've got to go in with the view of, we're going to try and protect a bit of what we have, but we're also going to try and build the next version of what it is we do. The one quick point I'd say, though, that has stunned me, last week was the Frankfurt Book Fair, the biggest trade fair for the book publishing world. And apparently the book of the fair, there's always a book of the fair, which is the hot rights property, was an AI-generated book, and there's some sort of mysterious circumstance around it. And that really surprised me, because even a few months ago, the idea that publishers would enter a bidding war for an AI-generated book, it would have seemed ludicrous, because all of the senior executives, the editors, everyone in the industry has been so hostile.
They need to be careful, because in the US you wouldn't be able to own the copyright on that book.
There's nobody owns
There's no copyright. I mean, if something's purely generated by AI, it's in the same category as an elephant's painting and unowned.
Well, no, there's some story. There is an author, but there's some kind of weird story, and I think people are buying into the story. But it shows that already, as soon as executives scent a commercial opportunity, they are willing to pivot pretty fast out of their deeply held principles.
That's what happened with YouTube. The DRM came in kind of 2012 or whatever, and suddenly what had been the wild west of internet video distribution suddenly became a source of monetization. The other thing is that people are acting at the moment as if the copyright debate has been won legally, and OpenAI have been shown to have perpetrated mass copyright. And actually, none of those cases has been to trial yet, and none of them has been won. Actually, if you're as boring as me and like reading legal documents about generative AI, I highly recommend you read OpenAI's defense in the case that's been brought to them by authors, because their defense is brilliant. What it says is, we've trained on everything. So if you're saying that anything that we output is a copyright infringement of anything, it's a copyright infringement of everything. And that's a super sophisticated argument, because what it's basically saying is we can't copyright infringe, in the same way that Mozart couldn't copyright infringe Haydn just because he'd been trained on 18th century Baroque music, because it's just too big a subject and no one could own the category. It's a fascinating debate that has not yet been tried.
And they'll try fair use, and that might work, because fair use is a thing and an established legal principle. So again, I think it feels really unlikely to me actually that it will just be a straightforward victory for authors and copyright owners.
But where does that leave? I mean, I had a conversation with OpenAI and I said, can you protect us so that we can protect our clients and the brands? And they said, yes, or everything in there is either licensed or publicly available. And I said, well, in my world, publicly available doesn't mean legally available. And I was a bit gobsmacked that was news to them. And then I thought, that's why we have to build our own LLMs, because if that's the attitude, where's the incentive for anyone to be creative? And to build on both of your points on the resistance in some of the media industry, we had a conversation with a music label last week, and they've started to talk about clean AI. And I said, well, what does that mean? And I said, does that mean the data's clean? And they're like, no, there's no AI. What we have is a working business model, and I guess they've probably got some emotional baggage from the streaming and that interrupting. But there was a starting point for this organization that the money and the value chain was working, and that they didn't want to budge on AI anywhere, because even if they used it in marketing and for album covers and language or creation of song lyrics, that would start a precedent that accepted AI into their organization, which they didn't know when the boundaries would stop it. And I don't think that's going to be tenable, but I did think that was a very interesting stance of that. Just put the shutters down. We're fine as we are, nothing to see here. Everyone's got the money.
There are. I mean, Adobe and Microsoft, as opposed to OpenAI, do have underwritten data sets, don't they? So they'll guarantee your legal risk using their outputs, which is an interesting way of going about it, isn't it?
But that just quick on that point about stuff being available but not sort of legally available. One of the big arguments that I think we'll hear more and more of is that obviously if you're a newspaper and you have a online version, you'll let Google index that. And effectively, what they're going to say is when an LLM trains on something, there's no real difference between Google indexing it and it being ingested into an LLM. It's kind of the same technological principle. And you might have to start saying, well, the whole sort of robots.txt is again a copyright infringement, and thus Google or Bing has infringed everyone in the same way. And again, that's an argument that people will
down
use.
the road now and read, modern English literature in the Radcliffe camera and come out with a degree in it, and someone will say, well, you've copyright infringed. Everything you're writing now is copyright infringement of all the F. Scott Fitzgerald because you read him.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a tricky argument, but it's an interesting one. I think the key point is anyone who says we've solved this doesn't know.
Yeah, I'm shocked and surprised to discover that the winners once again will be the legal profession. All these use cases work through. So, just going back to your time in Hollywood, the kind of
sounded really fun,
difficult, torturous month you had to spend in LA. Clearly, the executives were talking about some things that they weren't ready to do yet. They weren't interested in AI actors. Were there aspects of AI that they think could bring a different creative slant to what they're doing, or to enhance it?
I think so. So Nigel talked a little bit about simultaneous translation, and also there's another technology which I'm sure you've all seen where you can rephase the lips so that dubbing doesn't look like dubbing anymore. And actually, one of our former students, Ashkan, knows about all this in the audience. But I think that about 3-4 years ago, we saw quite an interesting change in Hollywood where shows like Squid Game and Money Heist, coming respectively from the South Korean and Spanish traditions, went global. And that's a really interesting place for us to go, because in this kind of multipolar world that so far has acquired only negative connotations, actually a technology which enables us to enjoy Ugandan comedy or Kenyan thrillers or Nigerian soap operas eponymously in our own language without the interruption of the appearance of dubbing could actually be a great kind of cultural equalizer in a really positive way. And so the deepfake technology that gets kind of a universally bad press at the moment might actually also yield better global understanding and actually kind of reinvention of entertainment as a non-Anglo-centric technology, which could be only for the good, actually.
Yeah. I was curious as to if they see AI playing a role in validating or pre-testing work. Because I know, Di, that we see in the ad industry so sometimes that people are creating AI focus groups or the ability to test the scale.
Yeah, there are a bunch of technologies. There's one called Synalytic. Again, there's probably people who know more than this, but there are technologies in the music business as well where you can road test an idea. There's a technology in Hollywood where I can say, I'd like to make a documentary about Michael Phelps. And it will then come up with 10 potential ideas for a Michael Phelps documentary, then road test them against the entire data set of previous performance at the box office of all documentaries, come up with the 3 that are most likely to succeed, and then do the pitch documents, complete with pictures, such that you can walk into Netflix and pitch the 3 with a market research already done. So that's pretty powerful. Yeah. That's one of the things the writers are worried about, is people training on the historic data set of scripts.
That's what I was about to say, that the data's flawed. And I hear everyone talk about prompt engineers, but I don't hear enough people talking about how they're going to deconstruct humans in the loop. And while we automate and use AI to create stuff, it's humans before the loop, humans after the loop. Let's celebrate a launch of a chief human after the loop officer. Who wants that job?
Yeah.
I don't hear enough people. I hear like a race to, great, I'll be able to do more and it'll be cheaper and it'll be faster. I don't hear the discussion moving along at the pace I'd like it to, but the job creation to make sure that it is humans and machine, that you're not training it on biased data. I mean, we did some research on deep fakes in advertising and looking at the relationship between authenticity of human representation in the ad versus diversity of the communities we're in. And actually, there is a legitimate reason to try and increase the diversity in ads, but it's not economically viable to do every age group, every body size, every ethnicity. But the data set, as you would probably remember this, the women turned into men as they aged, which sometimes it does feel like that, but actually the reality is the data set had older men and younger women. And at what point in these processes, if we're doing this, are we going to make sure we resource it properly to intervene and go, why is that happening? Go back and reset the data. And there's going to be a lot of people who go, well, that's recreating history, or that data set's fine, or it's statistically robust. But the data that we're going to be building these LLMs on right now is not fit for purpose. It's lacking in nuance. It's lacking in diversity of thought. we still run a lot on panels. Do you know the thing that connects everybody who's filled in a panel? They've got time to fill in a panel. Anybody here being reflected in panels? Possibly not. So I think there's got to be a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes to get that data really dreamy and inclusive and diverse and nuanced before you get to that.
There's something even more than that. It's just like the idea for succession was not in the data set. And so it's quite easy to imagine that an LLM could output 1 million new episodes of Friends, but extremely difficult to imagine that it could create episode 1 of Friends. And that's probably where the humans are going to have a role. So in 15 years' time, there'll be a ton of synthetic content everywhere on the internet, but the human role will be to do the original sort of Queen's Gambit moment where they come up with a show about a 1960s female chess champion that there's nothing in the data to indicate would ever be a success. But because some genius person had the idea for it, it'll work.
I would disagree on the point that an AI couldn't come up with radically original ideas like that. What I think wouldn't happen is it wouldn't get greenlit because people wouldn't see the business case for it. But I think certainly there's no reason why AI can't come up with radically new concepts. And, I think that's what has changed with the latest generation of AI. When it was kind of more, let's say, primitive machine learning systems just doing kind of automated curation, it would just be good at recommending things that you liked already and so on. But now I think, we do have systems that can exhibit radical creativity, and that will only improve more and more and more. But what probably won't change is just a sort of spreadsheet mindset that does kind of rule in most organizations, where actually, the reason succession happened is because the people who made it had enough credibility that they could just get an idea that seemed pretty strange, perhaps, over the line. But I do think there's no reason why an AI system couldn't be coming up with ideas that are just as creative, off the wall, interesting as any human over the next 5 years, certainly.
And I saw that there was a couple of Silicon Valley training data companies now hiring poets and people with creative master's degrees and what have you to help them on the supervised learning to potentially crack that problem as well. I just think that is the drift of the technology, and it's a bitter pill that this kind of flame of creativity has just been passed on. But what does the audience think? Do people in the audience think that they would, with equanimity, purely created by AI, or do they think that they need something specialist to humans?
Yeah, I think my point from your discussion on the panel there is if I had my 16-year-old daughter in here, she'd already be telling you that she's watching stuff on TikTok. She's seeing stuff that's generated with AI. So I think we've got to have that perspective of what's the next generation, not people who used to watch Hollywood movies. So I think your point, Michael, about the creativity, just as you wrote in the book about AlphaGo, discovered a move that creative people who've been running Go for some time didn't do. So my key point would be about what's the next generation thing, not the current one.
And I'll just make a sort of last point on this. By far the biggest media industry in the world is video games. And, maybe we care about if an author, director has created this film or a great novelist. But, most of those people playing video games really don't care whether that was produced by, a bunch of people in London, in Chennai, or a machine.
Well, you say that, but when people watch in the esports industry, when people watch video games for entertainment, when they play the AI, Riot Games have to slow down the AI to make it such that
I'm talking about the creation of the game. Who designed the palm trees in the game, and even who came up with the concept of a major game franchise like Halo. Does anyone, can anyone here say, name other than a handful of video game auteurs, who are the people who created the concepts that are generating billions of dollars in revenue?
We could debate it, because I could argue that it took a human to come up with Super Mario, but then I could create 1 million layers using an AI, which is what. But the truth is, no one's going to win this debate because no one's got a clue about any of this.
100%.
But what's for sure is that the 2020s in entertainment are going to be all about this nexus between the synthetic and the real. And that's fascinating. And even more interesting, they're actually merging. So I had this thesis that live experience is going to be the new thing, and everyone wants to go to get muddy at Glastonbury and what have you. But then you look at something like the MSG Dome in Las Vegas, which I'm sure you can see the imagery from one, and that's a kind of a perfect combination of the synthetic, the AI-driven AR content, whatever, and the human experience. And so maybe there's a new thing, which is going to be this merging of these two tropes, the human and the AI.
Or ABBA in London.
Yeah.
I think we've got maybe 9 minutes left, I'm going to say, for some questions.
Thanks, Stuart. I just was listening there, and I just reflected back on the conversation we started, Alex, when you talked about kind of talking to the studio execs. Actually, this debate we're having is possibly the debate the actors and screenwriters are having in their minds right now. And actually, it's the stalwart studio execs who are in that world of people watch films, how do we evolve films. And to that gentleman's comment around new media, perhaps that is the new. So we're already having that debate. So it feels to me like that's very live and real. And actually, what the studios are not responding to is that progressive technology leap.
Yeah. Well, Michael mentioned generative AI agents, and I think they're what's going to reinvent reality TV, because you're going to get into these brilliant sort of Turing test situations where there's 5 people in the room and 3 of them might be AIs and 2 of them might be real, and who's who and all that. And I think that's where we're going to take the big brother.
AI dating show.
Exactly. No, someone's going to do no joke. Someone's going to do blind date where there are 3 contestants and only one of them is real. Yeah, and so
I actually would watch that show.
Yeah, I know someone's working on that. It's good. They call it the Turing test. But your agent's point, I think agents with that autonomy and agency is really where entertainment is going to go. It's going to be fantastic. The interaction between human and agent.
Yeah, I want to just touch back to something that Michael said in his introduction about himself, and it has a lot of relevance to the boundaries between AI, generative AI, and human creativity. And he said the significance of the painting of the hand was not the actual image itself, but in fact was created by a human. The most important aspect of our stories is that they reflect a human experience or a collection of human experiences. One of the most successful video games of all time is The Last of Us. And I can speak from not first-hand knowledge, but second-hand knowledge of a voracious video game consumer, my son, who said, this game is great because of the story. It's great because of the story. Now, AI can come in and enhance that story, create the world or the universes that story inhabits visually, create the branches of that story, which are critical in video game play. But the human experience aspect of it is something that I think is not going to go away until robots rule the world. So it is something that I think is a key aspect that the Hollywood writers or the Broadway script writers and musicians and everybody has to focus on, is that what we are communicating to each other are human experiences. AI can help enhance that process. For instance, in rewrites, when you're writing a Broadway show or any play, the process before it gets live in front of an audience are constant rewrites. And AI could help with that process. It will take away some money from the people, the dramaturgists and people that are brought in like that, but it is a way that a production can happen quicker, can become more economical to produce. And I think that is going to resonate with studio executives and producers very, very quickly when they see how much money they can save and how quickly they can turn around or rewrite or edit or any of these things.
Can I just add on that, because I'm married to a video game guy. I often get called a non-playing character by my 14-year-old son. And feedback is a gift, isn't it? But actually, we were having a debate at home on the role of AI with non-playing characters, because actually you can bring whole new dimensions, almost a video game equivalent to outpainting, on what's going on in a video game, because you could talk to a character that could talk to you in a different language, or that the ability to create a breadth, and the same is in the advertising industry. It gives you the ability to tell stories that you wouldn't normally be able to viably resource, just actually bringing these characters.
And those characters could recommend products to you.
Yeah, they can.
Now you're
I just quickly want to. I just want to push back on something, because it was Alex who said that the hand at Let's Go was imbued with meaning because it was human, and I agree with that. But actually, I think most of the meaning that is imparted by cultural works, it's not in what's gone in; it's what a human takes out. That the true meaning is in the reception rather than necessarily the creation. There's all kinds of important works like the Bible, who we don't really know much about who wrote that or what their thought process was. And that doesn't really matter because people have taken a lot out. And, so I think actually that's the important thing, is the human reception rather than the creation. And again, I would say there's nothing about The Last of Us that is somehow uniquely human. There's no sort of necessary a priori reason why that could not have been machine generated. It's just ultimately it is a sequence of words and codes and images that are arranged in a certain form that we take meaning from. So I think there is still something deeper going on.
Perhaps one more question.
Media and publishing and thinking that they're not being interested in using AI better with content. I think it's a classic situation in which an industry is ripe for disruption. So across the industry, have no interest in disrupting the core business model that makes very much money. So the legal landscape is also grey, and therefore there will be firms that come in producing fast, low-cost content who are willing to navigate that legal landscape, and who will ultimately, in a certain case, probably win. I'm thinking about the Ubers of the past or the Netflixes of the past, and it's completely changed the paradigm. And so in some ways, I think it's a really interesting debate panel reflect on not what would be stopping us, like copyright law, from getting involved in this or using it in our businesses and marketing and things like that, but instead, what steps we can be taking to navigate that legal landscape in order to sort of, just as the regulatory environment is in right now, still are training you as we innovate disruptively. The pace of technology is moving much faster than the legislation can keep up with. And I do think there's a lot of opportunity there.
I think we only have a few minutes left, but if I could get if there's some quick responses.
I could break it on the aphorism that I usually trot out. It's not human versus AI. It's human versus human plus AI. So that's the competitive landscape that you're really dealing with. So you probably do need, the sort of gender biased, wingman AI, with you, because without that you'll be up against someone who else has got it, so they'll beat you.
I totally agree with that. I mean, building literacy, building a culture where people can share, building a culture where people can, and that they surface it, they don't make the problem worse because you punish that or they have to go and work on special projects. Creating that we're all in this, we're all learning, being conscious of how fear of people losing their jobs or their roles being displaced might be slowing down that change. I've heard of companies who have openly invited all their employees, if you think your job could be displaced by AI, tell us. And I've been talking about that at WPP. Like, what if we are that kind of organization that says, don't worry, we already run deep skill, upskill, we can enhance it to reskill programs, so that if we start with, we will try and protect all our employees, but the jobs might look different over the next 5 to 10 years. Then you have the copyright and all the external factors that have a different challenge, but actually the people is the bit that I spend most of my time looking after.
It's been fascinating how many of these conversations about use cases circle back to people, circle back to data, and circle back to businesses willing to either try and disrupt themselves rather than just make a feature of some of this innovation, or prepare themselves to be able to push this fast enough to market. So, fantastic discussion. Thanks very much to everyone for making the session this morning. It's coffee in a second. If you can just thank the panel. And